Welcome to I Said What I Said, a sports podcast giving you opinions not heard anywhere else. I'm your host, Brad Wakai, alongside my co host, Tyson Gentry. And Tyson, we are back today to preview another conference. And now I told you off air that this is a conference I normally malign, I normally make fun of, I normally call soft, but I'm not going to do it this year. I'm extremely interested in the Pac 12.
I told you that I think that's because this is the last year we're ever going to do a Pac-12 preview because it sure looks like this conference isn't going to exist in a year's time. So I think it's more like you don't know it yet, but this is like a celebratory little thing for you. You get to shit on this everybody one last time.
Yeah, that might be the case. I think you're right. Like something deep in my soul and my brain is like, just be nice on the way out the door while they crumble.
And then as soon as there are new conferences, you're gonna be like, I told you that they couldn't play. Like, what are they going to do the Big Ten for?
The vitriol is just going to come right out. but so we did the ACC preview last week, and if you haven't seen that, go ahead and check that out on YouTube and Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen. But Tyson, they got rid of divisions. You know what? The Pac-12 has no divisions either, baby. Like, you know what? Maybe I should be less harsh on them because they had some sense and they did it early. They got rid of it last year, and I thought it worked out great as we got USC Utah in the championship game, and we would have had a completely different title game if it wasn't for that. So once again, divisionless in the Pac-12, which I think sets up great, and the schedule is awesome again this year.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's tough. Like, I understand where you're coming from, but it's really tough to get a team into the college football playoff when they lose the conference championship to a team they might not have had to play. So that makes it difficult because everybody year over year bitches about how the Pac-12 never gets any representation. It's because you can't – like, if you can't handle Oregon State on the road, you are not beating Georgia, and that's just the end of discussion.
Yeah, that's just the way it goes. But this year, it feels like at the top, there's a lot of more heavy hitters than we've had in the past. USC, obviously, with Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley returning. Oregon with Bo Nix, year 2 of Dan Lanning, that seems to be interesting. Washington, another duo back with Kalen DeBoer, the head coach, and Michael Penix back for another season as well. And then we know what Utah does. And it feels like those are the 4 big boys in this conference. And those are the 4 favorites to win it. But I feel like this is about as neck and neck as we've seen the top 4 of this conference be.
I don't agree with that. I think last year I was pretty confident, and if you can go back and listen, I was pretty confident it was Utah's conference to lose, and that USC was pretty close to them. This year, to me, it feels like USC, and then we'll get into it, but the way I see it, I think it's USC, a step down to Washington, and then a step down to Oregon. I think we're putting them so close together because we don't really know what to do.
That's interesting. Okay, so let's dive into USC then, because they are the favorites. They were in the Pac-12 championship last year. They lost to Utah, got housed by Utah. And I think the big thing that you need to start with USC, Tyson, is that defense, because it was truly, truly atrocious last year. And I thought Lincoln Riley would maybe use last year as an excuse to cut Alex Grinch, his defensive coordinator. No, he's back. And so what do you do there? But, last year going 11-3, they went 8-1 in conference with their only loss to Utah, then lost again in the Pac-12 championship game. They got a lot of interesting stuff here. I think really, if you look at their schedule, hardest games at Notre Dame, USC should blow them out, or they're a better roster. They host Utah, host Washington, host UCLA, then they go at Oregon. That's it. Toss-ups, sure, you can maybe pick a couple in there, but really, that's it. And their non-conference, Nevada and San Jose State. This is a team poised to win big this year.
This is I'm kind of running under the assumption that if USC doesn't go undefeated in the regular season, it's a disappointment.
Interesting.
They're soft. They're always going to be soft. When Lincoln Riley is your head coach and Alex Grinch, especially as your defensive coordinator, you're going to be soft. Kyle Whittingham and the boys in Utah last year were able to punch him in the face because Cam Rising is a really good college quarterback that can just kind of keep it around and let that defense do its thing. He tears his ACL in the Rose Bowl, and I think that blew the lid off any expectation I had for Utah. And Alex Grinch stinks. We've said that year over year forever. But they hit the portal hard on defense, bringing in Bear Alexander from Georgia, Anthony Lucas from A&M, Mason Cobb from Oklahoma State, who is my boy, and then Christian Roland Wallace from Arizona. So they might have realistically brought in 4 starters. And it might be a learning curve situation. I don't think, at least looking at it, that Alex Grinch's defense has as much like minutia to get into, like small details to learn, that maybe Nick Saban's would, right? So I think this might be something where these guys can kind of walk in and play right away. We know what the offense is. We know that this is the next guy in Caleb Williams. It's a loaded group of skill position players. They're going to score a ton of points. This might be a 40-point-a-game offense or whatever. What did Washington average last year? Like 39.7?
Almost
like
40, yeah.
This could be like how USC approaches the season. And I just don't know if anybody else is going to have sustained firepower to keep up with them in this conference.
Yeah, with those guys coming in from higher level conferences. Well, first of all, there's a reason why they're leaving the situations they're in. Like, let's not forget about that too. Like, when we look at these,
nobody starts at Georgia and then goes, you know what, I'm going to move.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think we always got to keep in mind, like, it's nice. Like, look at these guys going into USC, but why were they jettisoned out of their place? Why did they want to have a change of scenery? And it could be for different multitude of reasons, right? They're young college kids. They're young men. Like, they want to figure stuff out. NIL, obviously, and USC has very deep pockets with these boosters. But the other thing, too, with USC, they're 14th in returning production on that team last season. So, 76% of their entire production on offense and defense is back. The offense overall, 75%, which ranks them 32nd in the nation. And then defensively, 78% of what they did last year is back, which is 15th in the nation. Now, you expect in year two, some of these guys were holdovers from the previous era, the Clay Helton era. So in year two of the Alex Grinch system, some of these bigger names, bigger talents coming in, you hope that it improves. Tyson and I, obviously, we've seen this Alex Grinch story before, so we're not so sure about that. And obviously, Caleb Williams won the Heisman last year, right? 4,500 yards, 42 touchdowns, 5 picks, like 8 more, or 5, and 8 more on the ground, touchdown-wise. So it's going to go as he goes. So that's pretty much USC in a synopsis, right? Like, is the defense going to be good? We know the offense is going to be good.
It's nice to only have one question, as opposed to last year with USC, we had about 45.
Now, Oregon, Tyson, so you have them as a lower tier. Now, that's interesting because the odds makers, they have them second behind USC to win this conference. So I'm going to ask you, like, what did you see in Oregon that you're like, I'm not too sold on them, or I'm not too sure about them?
Well, I think people are excited. Like, they're bringing back 7 starters on defense, which is awesome, right? They're missing Christian Gonzalez and Noah Sewell, which were their 2 best players probably on that defense a year ago. They're also going to have 4 new starters on the offensive line this year. And, I mean, Brad, you know the reason. I don't believe in Bo Nix. I've never believed in Bo Nix. I didn't believe in Bo Nix when the hype was insane when he was 18. I honestly thought he was going to be much worse last year. I was encouraged and surprised. I'm not rooting against this guy. I just don't think he's as good as kind of the general consensus on him. I thought Dan Lanning did a hell of a job to kind of come in here last year. It was a tougher takeover job than I think people were giving him credit for. This is just Oregon football. I think that this is a 5 touchdown a game offense, or up and down the field. I put them down because I think USC is like that. I think that Washington is certainly like that this season. I think Oregon State's going to be better, and I think they slot in. They might be worse than Utah, man, depending on who's running the show there at quarterback. I am not a Bo Nix believer, and honestly, I think that dude he's going to get every chance to succeed again. But when Bo Nix gets chances to succeed, oftentimes it leads to failure. Like, if Oregon's in a close game, 2 minutes left, they're down by 4. Bo Nix has 65 yards to go, score a touchdown. Is he scoring that touchdown?
I don't know. He's done it before, like when he was a freshman, and that's on the hype train. I bought into his freshman.
He was a freshman like 4 years before COVID. He was a freshman with Joe Burrow.
I think this is still his true senior year. No?
It's crazy. It's crazy. It feels like this dude has been around forever.
God, I know. It's like he's got the Drew Timme syndrome, Like, if everybody's like, he's been in college forever. It's like he's actually played 4 years.
Spotlight. That's it.
Bo Nix last year, to your point, had a fantastic season, rebounding from his struggles at Auburn, 3,593 yards. He actually completed 71.9% of his passes, which is incredible because we look at him when you watch the tape when he was at Auburn, the inaccuracy was hard to watch. Like, he was spraying it all over the field. So him improving on that. Now it's a little bit easier in the Pac-12, but 29 touchdowns through the air, 14 on the ground, which I think is something like he's using his athletic frame a lot more. 510 rushing yards. He only threw 7 picks, which for Bo Nix is good because he's been much maligned about how his turnovers.
Half those were week one
against Georgia. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so he really took care of the ball last season. And so I think that's why the hype is here. I'm much more bullish on Oregon compared to you, I think, in terms of where we sit on this podcast. Now, I don't think they're as good as USC. I think they still have some work to do there. Now, Cristobal did a hell of a job recruiting while he was at Oregon. So he didn't give Lanning like a bare cupboard by any chance here. And I think Dan Lanning is going to come in and be able to recruit this area to a high level. But if you look at it, they're 54th in returning production, so not terrible. 65% of their overall production's back, 65% of the offense is back, and 65% of the defense. So just straight across the board. Okay. We kind of got the same squad from last year, missing pieces here and there. But Tyson, this is where I kind of pump the brakes a little bit. At Washington, at Utah. Like, we know things get nuts at Washington whenever these two teams play. Utah is always tough to play. They host USC, which I think is good for them, but then they host Oregon State, but the Civil War is always a little crazy. But in a non-con, Tyson, they have to go at Texas Tech. That's early.
So
and
rough.
it's I'm curious because is Texas Tech going to be that good? Who knows? But they're going to be physical and they're going to play. And what did Georgia do to this team last year? Like, they pushed them around. So that's where I'm a little bit okay. I see where you're coming from a bit on Oregon, but I'm much more confident in them than you are.
Yeah, and that's fairly typical. Brad likes the flashy up and down. He loves watching people running up the score. He doesn't like football, people. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, I do have a little bit of that in me. I'm not going to lie to you. But that's when it's the MAC.
There you go. Yes, Tuesdays are different.
Let's get into Washington then, Tyson. This offense last year was unbelievable. Like, Kalen DeBoer paired with his old guy, Michael Penix, when they were both at Indiana, and DeBoer was the OC. Like, they lit this conference on fire, man. I mean, Penix last year, 4,641 pass yards, 31 touchdowns, 8 picks. Like, the offense was prolific. Like you said, they scored like 40 points a game last season on their way to an 11-2 record, which is a massive turnaround to what they had under Jimmy Lake before. And so you kind of look at it like this could be a sneaky team this year. 22nd in returning production with 73%. Offensively, they get 74% of that prolific offense back. And then defensively, which was bad last year, 73% of them are back. Now, that could either be a blessing or a curse with more experience back, but also experience that was bad. What do you think of this Washington team?
So I think the concerns are the same as it was last year. I think the front seven's really not that bad. Like, the edge rushers are okay. The linebackers are okay. And when I say okay, I really mean good. I just am not going to like hype them up. The secondary is just trash. Like, you could do whatever you wanted in that Washington secondary last year, it felt like. But, Brad, the reason I'm high on Washington is you're talking about a team that averaged 40 points a game, that is bringing back their starting quarterback. It's bringing back their top 2 receivers. Everybody is now familiar with the system. Kalen DeBoer kind of felt like he had these guys ready to roll at every single big game that they walked into. Losing a couple. Michael Penix Jr. was going to be my Heisman pick for this season. I'm just really worried that he has to beat USC for that to be true. Because I think it could be a Hendon Hooker situation where it's like everything's going great, and then all of a sudden you play the big boys and it doesn't look so good. And I felt for that last year. Dude, they're going to score a billion points. And again, I think personally that this is a weaker iteration of the Pac-12 at the top, because I'm not buying Oregon. For the first time in a long time, I'm out on Utah. So, like, to me, I think that if you're betting, and we'll get into it at Money Making Time, somebody else in this conference has to win 10 games. And I'm on Washington.
At USC, at Oregon State for hard games, it is impossible to win at Oregon State with what they got going on there. Like, nobody wins there. It's crazy.
So cool, though. It's probably my favorite thing to watch.
Host Oregon, like you said, and host Utah. That's interesting. Now, their first game is against Boise State. Ooh, man.
That's an over.
Little old school.
That is an over.
That's absolutely an over. Utah. Now, we've talked about them a couple times, and obviously the big question here as it pertains to Utah, what's the situation with Cameron Rising, their quarterback? So he tore his ACL in the Rose Bowl last year against Penn State, and there's some speculation, which I think is kind of crazy, that he's going to be back for week 1.
There's no way.
I just don't see it. Me personally, I think if you want to handicap Utah this year in any way, whether you're looking at it for betting, if you're just wondering how they're going to be this year, I think you got to look at the front part of their schedule. And if they're missing Cam Rising, you're in big trouble. Because after that, like we saw what happened last year. Like when he went out in that Rose Bowl, like their offense was anemic. And so,
Yeah.
yes, they have a good running back. Yes, we know they're physical. Yes, that offensive line is going to be able to push people around, especially in this conference. But you're going to have to also score points. And so that's the question I think with Utah here.
I think that's been the rub with Utah for a long time is like, we know the defense is going to show up. If the offense is just good enough, this is a double-digit win football team. And it feels different this year. And it'd be 7 months or 8 months since Cam Rising tore his ACL to get back. So even if he is back, is he good? Is he okay? Is he ready to roll? Is he trusting himself rolling out of the pocket? Because one thing about Cam Rising is that dude wins football games. Like, I think that if he gets healthy, this is a guy that spends 10 years in the league, and you don't even really notice he was on your favorite team, but he was there for 6 seasons. That's who he is. And it's a running game with, like, Jackson's coming back, and he had 515 yards, 520 yards last season, when it's kind of been the strength of this football team for quite a while. Is like Kyle Whittingham's like, hey, we're going to punch you in the face, react to it, deal with it. No Dalton Kincaid, but they get is it Brant Kuth? Kuithe, something like that. He's coming back this year. He missed all of 22, so you hope they're able to replace some tight end production. But I don't know what we're getting out of Utah. I know that they're going to try to hold these teams, but it's a lot easier to hold teams when the offense can have the ball for 7 minutes of possession. When the offense is just punting to Caleb Williams, and then he goes back down and back down, good luck.
Their schedule is brutal.
Host Florida and Baylor is so hard.
At Baylor. That's the thing too, and then you got to go at Oregon State, at USC, at Washington. Like, that is just a brutal schedule. It just is so hard. Man, I don't know. When you're looking at that, that's their non-con too. Florida, Baylor, and then Weber State. Like, really? Thanks, schedule makers. Like, we got guys playing Portland State, Hawaii, and others, and we got to go Florida and Baylor. Good job. But it's Kyle Whittingham, man. This is going to be his 20th season. He has a record of 154 and 74. Like, the guy can coach. Very impressive. And so the other thing too, Tyson, their returning production is high. So yes, Rising is factored in this. Like 16th with 76% returning. Now offensively, it jumps even higher. Like they're 5th in the nation with 83% back. But if Rising can't go early, like that's 70. A lot of the production, right? And so I don't know. Like, it's just, I think there's a ton of question marks surrounding Utah that makes me look at them like, I don't know. There's going to be a lot going on here. Let's get to the middle of the pack teams here when it comes to the odds.
Oh, you missed a perfect pun, man. You could have just dropped the K on the bottom of the screen.
Oh, you're right. Jeez. Who's our producer? We got to get him fired.
Come on.
UCLA and Oregon State are the middle of the pack teams here. Like, it feels like we talked at the top. It's the haves and the have-nots, but there's actually a little tiny middle class here, and that is UCLA and Oregon State. Now, would anybody ever say, I want to talk about Oregon State over the glamour of UCLA? Probably not, but we're going to do it. Like, because Oregon State, that's our type of football, baby. Like, they're going to smash you. Like, they want to be physical. They want to shove it down your throat. They want to run, push you around. With Jonathan Smith in his 6th season here, up there in Corvallis. Now, DJ Uiagalelei, he's coming over from Clemson. That's the big question mark. I can't believe I'm doing it, Tyson. I'm a little bit more bullish. I don't know if I'm buying all the way in, but I'm bullish that he's going to have a bounce back season.
Just come all the way over to this side of the aisle with me, brother. I've been sitting on the Oregon State thing for like 2 years by myself.
You have.
Last year, it finally explodes. Because the over-under last year was like 6.5 wins or something like that for a team that already won 7 and then returned most production. This year's a little different, right? You get a lot of secondaries kind of graduating, going pro, transferring. Omar Spates transfers to LSU, who is one of their better linebackers. And then, like you said, it's DJU. But is there a better defensive coordinator in the Pac-12 than Trent Bray? Like, he walked in here and cut this thing from 28 points a game to 20, which might not sound like a bunch because we just talked about the ACC and all these bad teams that cut 20 points off their points allowed. To go from 28 to 20 is like lowering your handicap from a 5 to a scratch in golf. Like, that's a bigger jump to me than going from 40 to 32 or 30 or whatever. This team just wants to fight you. And I will always have a place in my heart for this style of football. And I don't like DJU. I thought he was overrated from the second he took the field. I think that this is a more maybe friendly system for him. I think that there's going to be a lot less going on. I think there's a lot simpler kind of reads, simpler things for him to get into, rather than at Clemson where it was like, hey, we got these 5 stars all over the field. We need to like find a way to manufacture touches for XYZ. When really at Oregon State, it's like guys open, timing, throw the ball, turn around, hand the ball off.
Yeah, I think that's the thing too. They simplify it for him, and which I think he needs, because it felt like he was just thinking so much at Clemson.
I mean, the Wake Forest game was a perfect example. It was almost like, dude, this guy has like, there's too much going on in his head. It was the same Darnold seeing ghost thing, and that was against a bad defense. Now he's kind of walking into a conference where it's very similar to the bottom half of the ACC as far as defenses go, almost throughout the conference.
Yeah, and to answer your question, defensive coordinator, listen, man, Morgan Scalley from Utah, and the only reason I say that is because Brock Heward, every single time he does a game, so it's like Morgan Scalley, he loves him, and I love Brock Heward. So
yes, I think we're the biggest Brock Heward pod on earth. He gets a rational hate, dude. If I'm turning the TV on, it's 8:00, it's dark outside, and Brock Heward's on the call, I know for sure this is about to be a shootout of epic proportions.
And his daughter plays basketball at University of Montana, so a little hometown flavor there. Now let's get into UCLA, because I think this is very interesting. It feels like Chip Kelly sort of figured this thing out, right? If you look at his overall record, now this will be a 6th season. So in 5 seasons, 27-29. Last year they went 9-4. And so you're like, okay, are things starting to kind of figure itself out at UCLA? Now, because people forget, this is not a powerhouse football program. Like, it's very hard to be good at football at UCLA because the academic requirements to get in there. Like, everybody's like, whoa, Beverly Hills, like, it should be so glamorous. Yeah, but you got to get into the school to play. And it's expensive, and it's hard to retain a coaching staff. And the school, it doesn't give out a lot of money to their football program. And so that was the uphill battle that Kelly was facing. We saw that early on. DTR? Yeah, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Like, he's out. Zach Charbonnet out. Now Carson Steele's in. If the MAC fans out there, he's going to
Ball State guy.
Gonna replace that. Ball State. So here's the question, though. Ethan Garbers was last year's backup, and he knows this offense. Then you get this kid coming in, 5-star stud, true freshman, Dante Moore. I think Garbers is going to be the day one starter with the opportunity for Dante Moore to play and potentially earn his way in. But what do you think about UCLA this year when it comes to their chances in this conference?
So I'm not buying any UCLA hype. It's not so much a Chip Kelly thing. It's maybe not so much even a UCLA thing. This is just a me thing when it comes to betting college football. This is a team that just hit their peak, and they lose their 2 best offensive players. This is a team that just hit their peak, and they're returning 8 starters on a defense that allowed 6.1 points per play. That's tough because a lot of those things were able, like DTR was never a Heisman finalist, but it was almost always like, hey man, that guy over at UCLA, like if they win 3 in a row, he's gonna get invited to New York. He starts out his career, he beats LSU. Really, the hype takes off from there, and he never fully delivered. But to get UCLA to 9 wins is insane. Zach Charbonnet was a way better college football player than I think anybody really realized because, again, nobody's watching. I think Chip's going to try to run 2 quarterbacks, and that's why I'm nervous about UCLA, because that's the Chip Kelly special right there, is to just try to ride the hot hand, which never has ever worked at quarterback in the history of football. It will never work, but Chip Kelly is so much smarter than the rest of anybody who's ever coached. He's going to try it. It's not going to work. And I think this is a Pinstripe Bowl team, like something like that. This is a 7-win team that sneaks their way into whatever slate you have over Christmas break.
That's interesting. I think this is going to be very, very interesting to watch, because if they have it rolling and Carson Steele fills in here and that kid's good, that 5-star.
If Dante Moore can play, this could boom. Like maybe he's just better than DTR. It's really hard. I just said Bijan Robinson was the best running back in the NFL, and now I'm here pumping the brakes on like a lower level. So I don't know.
Let's get in the Cellar Dwellers, and a lot of it. So Washington State's a long shot. Cam Ward is back. 2nd year coming up from the FCS. Washington State, though, we'll see. Like, that defense was really hard to watch last year, so that could be an over team. California, okay, Justin Wilcox still there. If it doesn't go well, I think he's out. Arizona State continue their rebuild. First-year head coach in Arizona State, and Stanford also a first-year head coach. But Colorado's sitting down here, 2nd longest odds to win. And I want to start there, Tyson, because Deion Sanders is coming over, Coach Prime. I'll put it this way. I think it's going to work in the long run. I think them heading back to the Big 12 is actually very, very beneficial to the program. We're not going to see it this year, but he's already recruiting at a massively high level that Colorado hasn't recruited at in a long time. I think it's going to work. It's just going to take a few years.
Yeah, and I mean, it's impossible kind of right now to sit here and figure out necessarily what they're going to be in year one, because like Jackson State guys aren't going to be able to come up to the Pac-12 and flip this thing around. But Shedeur Sanders might be the best quarterback that Colorado's had like since they came to the Pac-12. Travis Hunter might be just the best player that Colorado's had since they've came to the Pac-12. So like those two things are awesome. It's also giant target. Like this is a circle. Every single, I don't even care about the players. Every single coach in the Pac-12 is going to want to beat these guys by 100. And I just think it's really hard to recruit 40 new players at a program with no history, no culture set, and then do that year one. It's one thing when these guys walk into new jobs, whether it's like Brian Kelly at LSU or whoever, but like when Ryan Day got to Ohio State, he wasn't picking up a dumpster fire. This was a team that like won a national championship not long before he showed up. So it's a different level, and it's really hard to just kind of be like, oh, they got Coach Prime and all these transfers. They're going to win 7 games.
1-11 last year. This is a rebuild.
They were lucky to get one.
And that was in conference. So keep that in mind. They didn't win a single game out of conference last year.
They lost 45 points a game on defense.
They got here's the other thing too. At TCU, at Oregon, home USC, at UCLA, at Utah, home Oregon State.
Do they win any of those games?
No. Hosting Nebraska, probably don't win. At Washington State, that's going to be tough. I mean, my God. So that's why I say let's pump the brakes a bit on the Coach Prime thing. I know the haters are going to be like, "He sucks, woo! Look how bad Colorado is." It's like.
And then in 3 years, when they're in the Big 12 Conference Championship game, everybody's going to have to be real quiet.
That's the thing, too. So we'll see. Now, the others I mentioned, Tyson, like Arizona State, Arizona, anything you want to do a quick word on before we get into Money Making Time and start making some bets here?
I think Washington State would be the one that I would circle there. They lose Jarrett Kingston, the offensive tackle. He goes to USC, which is going to be a significant blow because he's good enough to start there. And they lose their top 4 receivers from 2022. That's tough. And like defense was super good. Cam Ward was good, but we kind of talked about it before the show. Like Cameron Ward threw for 3,300 yards and 23 touchdowns. And just kind of the nature of Pac-12 football is like you're gifted 2,515 of those when you start the season. So it's tough. I know that they're getting a lot of maybe post sleeper hype because I think people were excited and encouraged by them last season. But the only other one I would talk about would maybe be Arizona, just because Jed Fish went from 1-11 to 5-7. And again, like that's a team that just lost their top receiver to USC. So it's almost like you want to get excited about these teams, but their best players are in conference just for somebody else.
Yeah, and Stanford, obviously, David Shaw steps down, and they're going to be horrible. I actually kind of like the coach they hired. Like he knows the area at Sacramento State.
Troy Taylor,
yeah. So he comes up actually from the Big Sky, right? Sacramento State still in there, FCS. Yeah. So this is going to be a rebuild. It's going to be tough. But let's move into Money Making Time here, Tyson, and let's start trying to make the people out there some money. And so if you're unfamiliar, we're going to go through all the win totals of every single team. If there's anything we like to cherry pick, we'll have it for you. So stay along with us. But we got to start here. Let's pick a conference champion. Who is going to win the Pac-12? And I did it last year. I'm doing it again. I'm picking USC at plus 200. I think this is just the best team overall. They got bullied by Utah. I think they addressed some of, at least on paper, some of their physicality concerns, and I expect them to be much better. And I think Caleb Williams is going to continue to play at a high level as he gets ready to be the number 1 overall pick.
So this is what I think is the biggest blunder by the sports books by a mile in college football this year. I think USC is a play at plus 200. That's who I'm picking. But the reason I say like it's a blunder by them, Brad, USC is plus 250 to make the college football playoff. How does that make any sense in the world? Like if you're looking at this Pac-12 conference and you're thinking, well, it's actually going to be pretty close between them and Oregon and whoever else, but then you go to the college football playoff and you're like you put USC at 5th in the odds, those don't add up to me. So I think that there's some serious juice here with USC because I fully expected this to be a minus 115 number.
Yeah, well, last year, let's put it this way, it was plus 150 in the first year of Caleb Williams, in the first year of Lincoln Riley.
In a better Pac-12.
And now you get USC plus 200. And so Tyson and I both on USC
which
to
feels
win
gross.
the Pac-12 this season. You know how it is. Come on, you got to get a little. I mean, we were trusting Lincoln Riley to win
in a big game too.
All right, let's get into win totals. California over/under is 5.5 with the over plus 128, under juiced minus 158. I think this team is really going to suck. You know, like they have some returning production, but I think Justin Wilcox is I think he's going to get fired. Like this thing is not going to go well for me. Like Sam Jackson, the fifth, sick name, but his game, I don't know if it's sick. You know, he's transferred in from TCU. Like he wouldn't get in at garbage time, and there was a lot of that last year for TCU. And so I just don't know, man. Like sick name, we got to see the game. I'm going under 5.5 on Cal.
I'm staying away from Cal just because sometimes in college football, new scheme, new quarterback means good things. And so that's a little bit interesting. I will say, if you're going to watch Cal, watch Jackson Sermon, because that dude is probably an All-American this season at linebacker. And I think that there's a chance he's a first or second round pick in the NFL draft.
Let's get into Oregon. You're not very high on them. Their win total set at 9.5. Over plus 100, under minus 122. The odds makers clearly telling you they have a lean towards them probably winning 9 games. Are you betting anything one way or the other?
I'm going under 9.5 here. I just think that's good value. Again, I think that this is probably a conference with 2 double-digit win teams, and I don't think Oregon's going to be one of them.
Oh, I like that. I'm staying away though. Me personally, like I said,
we only get one more chance to bet against Bo Nix, dude.
Yeah, but last year it burned me. I'm not gonna lie to you. Last year it burned me a little bit. So I'm gonna stay away from Oregon this year. I could see them winning 10 games. Like I said, I'm more bullish on this team than Tyson is, but I don't want to put my money on that just because, like you said, there's just some question marks, especially in year 2. Oregon State. Now, this is Tyson's darling here. They're sitting at 8.5, over plus 130, under minus 160. Now, last year, they won 10 games with a win total set lower, but a new quarterback and DJU, returning production down a little bit. Are you backing your boys here to go over their number?
I am. I think this might be a 9-win football team, and part of it is because I'm interested at plus 130. I think that if this was like right on even money, I might stay away, but I think that there's a real world where this is not just the 3rd best team in the conference, but they could get to a position where the 2nd best team in the conference. Nobody's going to want to go in there and play those guys. And it's not very fun when Oregon State comes to your house and just decides like they're going to piss all over the front door and you got to try to kick them out of there, because that's who they are. And in a conference full of everything is complicated on offense, Oregon State's going to do one thing and like you got to figure out how to stop it. And I don't believe in DJU, but I sure don't believe in pretty much everybody else in the Pac-12 just as much.
I think this is where you could win these bets here. At San Jose State, home UC Davis, home San Diego State in the non-con. Very, very easy there. Then they host Utah, host USC, host Washington, then are at Oregon. And that's the Civil War game. Like anything happens there. So they're hosting 3 of the big boys in this conference. And they avoid USC.
And they're allowed that cushion there with just 9. Like you're not hoping this is like they can have 3 losses and you're not sweating.
I'm going to stay away from it though, but I will tell you, like based on their schedule, I may sprinkle something on their conference at plus 1,200. You know, like if they're in the championship game, like we get juicy money on USC and Oregon State at plus 1,200. That may be something I'm interested in.
It's a little look.
So, yeah, not bad here. Okay, let's head over to Stanford. Because there's that 2.5, which is so low. And now it's under minus 172, juice way under. Now the over plus 138. Now they're telling you, based on the juice, that they're probably going to win 2 football games. Just based on what this is telling you here. They're 129th in returning production. They only get 35% of that back. Offensively, 34%. They have a battle apparently between 3 guys. Like they don't know who it's going to be. A Syracuse transfer, the guy who's been there, Ari Patu, Justin Lamson is the transfer. None of these guys have over 25 career snaps. And defensively, they have 36% back. Like this is a complete rebuild. But I'm looking at the schedule. Like they got to go to Hawaii. I think Stanford might actually be favored in that game somehow, and they're also hosting Sacramento State. Like that should be a win because that's where Troy Taylor's coming from. So I just say that a long way to say that could be their 2 wins. But if they can beat Cal, who I think is going to suck, like minus 172 is not something I'm interested in.
No, and 2.5 is always and will always just be a number that I'm uncomfortable with. Like that is them telling you like that's the book saying this might be the worst team in the country, and like we don't ever really know that before a kick.
Washington 9.5 over plus 116 under minus 142. Now Tyson likes Washington. He thinks they could be the 10-win team. Are you going to bet that?
Absolutely, I am. But that beyond a shadow of a doubt, this is another play for me, and you're giving me a little bit of plus money there, not a ton, nothing to like really start salivating over. But this is a team that just won 10 games, that you feel like has a shot to step into kind of that Utah role as the main foil to USC. The schedule is a little bit harder than maybe you'd like to see when you're talking yourself into them winning 10 games, but you got to score points to play with Washington. And I don't know, looking through the Pac-12, I can find 2 that I'm pretty confident are going to score a ton of points, and I don't know about the rest.
I really want to take this over. I'm not going to do it, mainly because of Michael Penix Jr.'s injury history. That's the thing that makes me a little uncomfortable. Now, playing in the Big Ten is different than playing in the Pac-12. Like it's much more spread out in the Pac-12, which suits his game more. So maybe that doesn't, maybe that helps him. It probably does. Hosting Oregon, but at USC, at Oregon State, that could be tricky. And then, hosting Boise State for something Boise State's always going to be ramped up for them. We know what they do when it's time to play Pac-12 school on opening day.
But the Pac-12, before we get too far, this is, I think, the conference we did the best in last year. I think 7-1 for me and 6-1 maybe for you last season with this. And I think you lost on the USC winning the conference championship was the only thing you missed.
Yeah, and this is why I'm scared. Like, I think I like these numbers a lot more for what I expect to happen.
Sharper.
I think the book, they're sharper for sure. So I'm like, I don't know if I'm playing as much. Washington State over under 6.5 plus 132 for the over under minus 162. Telling me they're probably going to win 6 games. Are you taking that chance with the juice? Or are you playing under here?
I'm not going to touch this one because I think they're better than Arizona, Cal, Arizona State, Colorado, Stanford, but I don't know that. And like they might be better than UCLA or somebody I have above them. Again, I don't know it. So this is a week over week deal for me. This might just be you bet overs on Wazoo games.
7-6 last year, 4-5 in conference. And so obviously 3 out of conference wins. So this year they're playing at Colorado State. They're hosting Wisconsin, which I think is interesting, and then hosting Northern Colorado. So you expect 2 wins there. Probably not going to beat Wisconsin. And then they're hosting Oregon State. They're at UCLA, at Oregon, hosting Washington in a rivalry game. Then also, they're going at Cal, and they're hosting Arizona. So I think they got the easier game in the toss-ups on the road going to Cal, and then they get to host Arizona, which I think benefits them. So I really want to play this under, but I think it might come back and burn me in year 2 of Jake Dickert, the head coach, and Cam Ward in that offense. And so, or year 3, I guess now for Dickert now because he was the interim. Oof. So I'm staying away, unfortunately. I do want to play that under, but I'm going to stay away. Let's get to Arizona. Like you said, Jed Fish went 5-7 last year, 3-6 in conference. This was a play last year. When I gave this out, people were like, you got to be nuts for taking this. But 4.5 is their over under at minus 176 if you like the over, plus 142 if you like the under. They're telling you they think Arizona's going to win 5 games again this year. Now, Jaden Delore is back at quarterback. 90th in returning production. Like they've lost some guys and they've lost some playmakers. Are you taking anything here?
Yeah, I'm taking the over with Arizona. I'm pretty comfortable with that number, to be honest. I think this is a team that's pushing to make a bowl game. The defense sucks. And so that's the scary part. They allowed 209 yards a game on the ground in the Pac-12 last season. Like that that's bottom of the barrel stuff. But this again is like you return. It's Delora, right? Jaden Delora.
Yeah.
That's their quarterback. They bring back both their top 2 receivers, things like that. And again, it's just you like to see progression year over year. And Jedd Fisch kind of provides that. It's just I think the ceiling at Arizona is like if you're making a bowl game with 6 wins, like you get a statue.
Host Washington, at USC, host Oregon State, host UCLA, host Utah. So really looking at that, those are going to be probably 5 losses. And they lost 6 last year to hit this number. So they're going to go at Mississippi State, at Colorado, at ASU. Like those could be some toss-ups. Like we don't really know how Mississippi State's going to be, but their non-conference is Northern Arizona, that Mississippi State game, and UTEP. So some winnable games last year. Now this year. Now last year was a little different. I thought their non-con was super easy. Went 2-1. I think with that Mississippi State game, that's going to be interesting. But
UTEP's going to be tougher than probably we're thinking right now.
So I'm not going to lay the juice on this. I'm going to stay away just because of that number. So I'm not playing that. But Arizona State, they're at 4.5, over -115, under -105. So kind of split the book is. I'm not really sure how it's going to go. What are you doing?
I'm agreeing with the book. I have no idea. Like this is, dude. I don't even like watching Arizona State play football. So that might be part of the reason that I'm like not interested in this number at all. But it's like Drew Pine, probably. And I just don't want to bet on Drew Pine and have to watch him play football.
I like their new head coach, Kenny Dillingham. Now, he was the Oregon offensive coordinator last season. He was a big reason why Bo Nix had a great season. I just think Drew Pine stinks. Now, maybe he can do that with Drew Pine, but I don't think that's going to be the case. And so I'm gonna take under here. Under 4.5 or -105. I do like we're not getting the juicy side of that. They're 109th in returning production. The only 53% is back. Now, obviously, that's the case whenever your coach changes. Offensively, they're getting a little bit more back, but defensively, I think this team's going to stink. They also host USC, but they got to go at Washington, at Utah, at UCLA, and host Oregon. Also, their non-conference game, they got to go. They got to play against Oklahoma State at home and then host Fresno State, which I think could be sneaky. So I'm going to go under here. I'm liking this position. I'm taking the under 4.5.
30 transfers, man.
Dude, a ton of people leaving that program. Colorado, Coach Prime's first year, 3.5 plus 126. If you like the over, under -154. Are you doing anything?
I'm going under again. Like, the team might be better than I'm expecting, but I just like on paper, this looks maybe like it could be a 4 or 5 win football team. I have such a hard time believing that every other coach in the Pac-12 isn't going to smack the shit out of these guys when they play them. And part of it is because they took half their players. Like Coach Prime is just going around and grabbing Deion Sanders, gets who he wants. But dude, I just can't overstate. Like everybody is freaking out about a lot of these transfers who were where they were for a reason. Like I don't think Deion Sanders went out and when Lincoln Riley brought Caleb Williams with him to USC, it was like, okay, that's pretty big time. We think Shadir Sanders is good. He was playing nobody. And I cannot overstate that. He was playing nobody. So now we got to find out.
I'm going under 3.5 as well. And mainly it's due to the schedule. Like at TCU. And I know they lost a lot, but you still got to go down and play them.
Sonny Dykes is going to coach his ass off. That's not even close.
Hosting USC, at UCLA, hosting Oregon State, which is a little bit of a break, but at Utah, and that's later in the season when Rising could be back and feeling healthy. Then also in their non-con, they're hosting Nebraska, and they got to go at Washington State. These are tough games, man. I don't know. I'm going under 3.5 here. I think getting at -154 is actually kind of a gift when you look at this number's been pounded a lot by some of the sharper guys too. UCLA over under 8.5. Over -134, under +110. What are you thinking about over UCLA here?
I'm taking a little bit of a value shot here, under 8.5. Again, you go from the best record in Chip Kelly's tenure there at UCLA, and then you lose the quarterback, and you lose the running back, and you return a bunch on defense from a defense that allowed 6 points of play or 6 yards of play. which pretty much equates to 6 points every 25. But it's like guys move up and down the field on this defense. I'm not a huge fan of. I just don't think that UCLA is going to figure it out in this conference to be a year-over-year threat at the top. And I think that they're going to settle in at an 8-win football team kind of year-over-year. And last year was the higher end of that, and this year we might be closer to 5, 6, 7.
I'm going to stay away from it. Gosh, I want to get on with you with that value play. You know, they got to go at Utah, at Oregon State, at USC.
Let this be your Texas A&M. Jump in here with me. Because last year we were all A&M, and we cashed that in week 6.
Yeah, but that was just – I mean, I like Chip Kelly. I know you hate him, and so I don't have the same vitriol. So
I am.
But here's the thing, too. Host Coastal at San Diego State, hosting NC Central. Like, they should win all 3 of those games. Besides those 3 tough games, they're hosting Washington State. They should win that game. And then you're playing Arizona State, Stanford. Like, you're playing bad teams, man. Like,
that's under the assumption that UCLA is a good team.
Sure.
That's just what I'm not buying into. I think that they're closer to Arizona than the books make it seem.
Let's move into Utah. Theirs is also 8.5. Now, over plus 104, under minus 128. Because of the question marks surrounding Cam Rising, I'm going to take under 8.5. And it's just because I'm not sure what they're going to do, and the schedule is brutal. Like, Florida's going to be ready for revenge after what happened last year. Baylor, I mean, they're going to be better than what they were last year. They host UCLA. They got to go at Oregon State, at USC. Then they host Oregon, which should be interesting. That's later in the year. Then they got to go at Washington. That place is going to be nuts. And so, jeez, man, this is a tough schedule, especially early in the season too, when Rising may not be his best. Give me the under. Let's pick off some early losses.
Out of respect, I'm not touching this one. I think the 2 programs in the country that have paid me the most over the last 2 years have been Utah and Oregon State. And so I had to go back in on Oregon State, and I want to join you on the under, man, but it just you got to have morals. A man has to have a code.
All right, to close it up here, let's go USC. They're over under 9.5, over minus 120, under plus 138. Extremely juicy on the over. They're telling you they're going to win 10 plus games. Like, that's what that line is telling you. Or are you taking the over here?
I don't love the number at all. Like, this number sucks. I don't have the same number in Montana, so this is a hammer spot for me. I think USC is going to win 10 games, 11 games, 12 games. They're going to be undefeated. They should be walking their way into the college football playoff. Again, I think the gap between USC and the rest of the Pac-12 might be the biggest one in the country.
I'm really hoping this thing moves up to 10 so we can get a better number. Like, I would just love to take a flat 10 because I think they're going to win 11 games. They won it last year. This is a better football team. Like, Please, somebody move this up to 10 so that it can be like minus 110, like a normal number. And then I'll gladly push if, like, oh, yeah, this conference is actually pretty good.
Right. They lose to Washington or whatever, but you don't have to. That's the nice part about the 9.5, but it's also like, dude, they lost 3 games last year.
Yeah, like they lost 2, right? One in conference to Utah, one in the championship game, and then one bowl game. Like, they played 14. They won 11-3. Yeah. Like, I'm comfortable if it's at 10. Like, they're not going to lose 3 games like they did last year.
Part of it is nobody watched Tulane, so when Tulane shows up and beats you in a bowl game, it's a sour taste, I think, going into this year.
Please, I hope we can take advantage of it. Somebody move this up to 10 so we can get a better number. I'm begging you guys out there.
You need to call FanDuel.
I do. I'm gonna get on the phone with them. All right, well, that's gonna do it for our Pac-12 preview. Finishing up money making time here. We both like USC to win the conference at plus 200, and then we got all of our win totals. This will also be in our chalkboard. Tyson, go ahead and tell everybody where they can find us.
Yeah, it is the Chalkboard app. It's in the App Store, Google Play, wherever you download your apps. Group name is the Roundtable Bets, and not only are we going to have our chalkboard or our college football picks in there, we've got NFL stuff, and if you haven't been following our NFL previews, we're kind of just going through breaking down positions. Everybody in the world is doing conferences right now, and we did it a little bit. It's boring. Okay, it's tougher to handle that week over week. So we're trying to make it more palatable, but that doesn't mean that we're not throwing down plays on those divisions, on those long-term ones, and we'll have another show about that. But we are in the heart of when you can make money off these books. It's in the preseason. Season longs are going to pay you more anyways, unless you're you go full Rain Man and don't lose a week over week play until week 7. The season longs are going to be where your money's at. And baseball's got 60 games left. Like there's still we got Brad throwing soccer plays. Like there's everything you could think of in there, and it's not just us. You're more than welcome to join. We'll let you write in. It's free, and you can post your picks. If you have a MMA parlay, a 4-legger that you think is a pretty good look, go ahead and send it in there. We love the tail, man. It's more fun to hit with friends.
Exactly. And in the meantime, like, subscribe, and share the show. If you're watching us on YouTube, we appreciate it. Smash that like button. It really helps us out in the algorithm. And if you're not subscribed already, what are you doing? Hit the subscribe button. See when we are posting. Don't miss one. And same it goes if you're listening to some podcast form. Apple, Spotify, however you get your podcast. Don't miss anything. Go ahead and subscribe already. Then if you haven't sent in a 5-star review, please do it. If you want to ask us a question, we will answer it on the show in your 5-star note. So go ahead and do that. And then obviously, if you like us, if you hate us, share it with your buddies, especially if you hate us and you want to make fun of us with your friends. We can be your inside joke. That's okay. That's fine. We'll be back next week. We got a lot of content coming out next week. Seriously, we're getting ready for football season. We are geared up. We're ready to go. We're going to be back breaking down players, positions in the NFL, and then we're going to have another conference breakdown next week. It's going to be the Big 12. So we'll get you ready for that, as we have 4 new teams in that conference. It's going to be a big one. So we will speak to you all then next week. Till then, guys. Peace.